What's going on, guys? Here we are up at the Blue Mountains making a game, and we've been here for 5 days already. We've been too busy working on the game to record anything. So we leave tomorrow. So I thought, why don't I show you some of the stuff we've been doing?
My name's Billy, and along with my collaborator Brendan, we've been making a real-time strategy game called Grovekeeper for the last few years. Grovekeeper is a game about defending an ancient forest from loggers and poachers who've come to strip the landscape of life. On an annual basis, Brendan and I have made a habit of travelling up to the beautiful Blue Mountains in New South Wales for a game development retreat of sorts. We lock ourselves in a cosy little cabin on a beautiful property and work on our game for a whole week straight. This is to get rid of all the normal distractions that naturally come about in our day-to-day lives and really get stuck into some of the more demanding tasks in our to-do list. Not to mention, it's a good excuse to breathe the cold mountain air and drink some earthy whiskey. During our most recent trip, we've reshaped the game and added a lot of new systems and ideas into the mix, and have made some fundamental changes to the game that push it in a whole new direction. Let me explain. We recently put out a playtest demo on Steam. We've been watching the feedback slowly roll in, which has been instrumental in understanding how players are approaching the game. Apart from some of the normal bugs and jank that is to be expected, we got some valuable feedback about the gameplay loop and some ludonarrative dissonance that was hurting the experience. One of the most useful pieces of feedback we got came from our friend Toby. Shout out Toby. Although he's an amateur, he's a brilliant game designer. The thousands of hours he's put into playing every game on the planet have resulted in some true wisdom. The game is broken up into 2 phases, day and night. During the day, humans come into the grove and attempt to harvest your resources and destroy your units. And at night, you have the chance to recover and grow more trees. He pointed out that the night phase needed more meaningful decisions. At the time, you could plant trees, summon units, and position them, but there wasn't quite enough to manage. He also pointed out something that felt especially important. The wildlife needed to matter more. So we've made a fairly big change. We've added an entirely new category of placeable objects called undergrowth. These are smaller forest features that let you shape the grove, influence wildlife, create defensive traps, boost your economy, and prepare for the coming day in more interesting ways. The first one is the berry bush. This attracts rabbits and bears into the grove and encourages them to gather around it. Now that might sound simple, but it actually changes the game quite a lot. Previously, wildlife just sort of wandered wherever they wanted. You could protect them, but you couldn't really influence where they went. Now, with the berry bush, you can gently pull them away from danger and encourage them to settle in a safer part of the forest. And once enough wildlife have gathered around it, the berry bush becomes a buff zone, increasing the attack rate and range damage of your units nearby. So it starts as an ecological tool, but if you look after it, it becomes a tactical one as well. The glade works in a similar way, but for different animals. Instead of attracting rabbits and bears, it attracts deer and boar, and when enough of them gather around it, it becomes a zone that increases health and damage. So between the berry bush and the glade, the player now has a way to start shaping wildlife behaviour. You're not directly controlling the animals, but you are influencing the ecosystem, and that feels much more appropriate for a game where you're playing as a forest. The burrow is all about protection. If wildlife are injured or panicked, they can hide inside of it instead of being killed, so it allows you to bank your wildlife. This is important because one of the bits of feedback that we got was that once things started going badly, it could feel like you were just watching everything fall apart. Your units would die, your wildlife would get wiped out, and suddenly you had no resources left to recover. The burrow gives the player a way to prepare for that. It creates a small pocket of safety inside the chaos. The thorn bramble is much more aggressive. It's a wall of sharp, thorny growth that slows and damages human units that try to push through it. It also encourages boar to spawn, which helps tie it back into the wildlife system. This gives the player something more trap-like to place during the night. Instead of just responding once enemies arrive, you can start shaping the battlefield beforehand. It also creates some nice decisions around choke points. Do you use your best terrain for units, trees, brambles, wildlife habitats? That's the kind of choice we wanted more of. The mushroom ring is more economic. When placed in dense forest, it boosts the mage and production of nearby trees. It also encourages deer to appear. This one is really about rewarding players for growing a healthy, dense grove. Instead of trees just being individual resource generators, the mushroom ring gives you another reason to think about the layout of the forest. It creates interesting dense zones within the grove that look visually appealing as well. The hovel is probably the simplest undergrowth object, but it fills an important role. It increases your populace cap buy one. That means you can support more guardians, which is especially useful if you want to build a larger army or recover after taking losses. In older versions of the game, the population cap was dictated by the game's performance, with technical issues occurring once too many units were on the screen. But recent optimization adjustments have allowed for many more units than there previously was. The beehive is one of my favorites. You place it in trees, and when humans get too close, the bees swarm out and cause them to panic, using our new resolve system. So it does a few things at once. It protects the forest, it interacts with enemy morale, and it deepens the wildlife ecosystem. This is exactly the kind of synergy we wanted more of. A tree is no longer just a tree, it can become part of your economy, part of your defense, and part of the habitat that supports the wildlife.
Just on my way to the garden shed to get an axe to cut some wood. So I understand the irony there. Here we are, the loggers march. Try and really get into character and relate to these ancient people who really relied on wood.
The other major change was separating wildlife from mana. So previously, casting magic meant spending wildlife directly. Mechanically, it worked, but emotionally, it felt awful. Toby summed it up really well. Protecting wildlife just so you could sacrifice them later was completely against the vibe of the game. Now, wildlife generate mana for you based on their well-being. If their needs aren't being met, they won't produce much. But if they're thriving, they become more valuable, generating extra resources and strengthening your connection to the forest. That one change has made the whole game feel much more aligned with its theme. Now, rather than using them as ammunition, you're looking after their needs to get power in return. And that's exactly the kind of ludonarrative connaissance that we want Grovekeeper to have. The mechanics and the story finally pulling in the same direction. These additions, as well as a whole host of other small adjustments, has put the project in a much better position. Now, the night phase feels strategic and thoughtful. These new undergrowth mechanics work in interesting, synergistic ways that provide the player with more choice and pathways to victory. We've also added a new on-screen display that shows all of the units currently in the level, along with their health bars and rank. This is one of those changes that sounds small but makes a huge difference in practice. In an RTS, especially one where your units are spread out across a forest, it can be really easy to lose track of who's hurt, who's alive, and who has become genuinely valuable. Now, at a glance, you can see the state of your guardians and respond before things go completely sideways. It also helps reinforce the RPG side of the game. These aren't just disposable units. They level up, they survive battles, they become stronger, they've got names, and ideally you start caring about them and wanting to keep them alive. So that's where Grovekeeper is right now. This started as a fairly focused Blue Mountains work trip, but it ended up becoming one of the more important development pushes we've had in a while. The game feels more coherent, more strategic, and much closer to the thing we've always wanted it to be. A game about protecting something living. Not just defending a base, not just building an army, but growing a forest, shaping an ecosystem, and trying to hold back the people who want to cut it all down. There's still a lot to do, there always is, but this latest round of feedback has helped us see the game more clearly, and I think Grovekeeper is much stronger for it. So if you'd like to help us keep improving the game, we'd genuinely love to have you involved. You can join our Discord, play the latest test build, give feedback, report bugs, or just hang out and follow the development. And if Grovekeeper looks like your kind of thing, please wishlist it on Steam. It helps us enormously. And it tells Steam that this weird little forest defense game made by two blokes hiding in the mountains should be shown to more people. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.